I was requested to speak on the topic of Canto 7, Chapter 14, Ideal Family Life. And I don't see brahmacharis here, so I think we're okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the chapter summary and then from time to time stop and add and embellish and then go back to the chapter summary. Chapter 14 is the beginning of a whole new section because the previous chapter 13 was all about Prahlad Maharaj and Narada Muni narrating the wonderful story of Prahlad Maharaj to Yudhisthira. And the whole discussion goes back to the very beginning, where it's Narada Muni having a conversation with Yudhisthira. Well, not just a conversation, but rather than going over all of that, there's a break in topic, so many chapters about Prahlad, and then comes this chapter. This chapter describes the occupational duties of the householder according to the time, the country, and the performer. When Yudhisthira Maharaj became very much inquisitive about the occupational duties for the householder, Narada Muni advised him that a grahasta's first duty is to be fully dependent on Vasudeva, Krishna, and to try to satisfy him in all respects by executing one's prescribed devotional service. And that applies to all the ashrams, right? The landscape of each of the ashrams is a little different, but the principle doesn't change. There's a very nice description I like in Canto 1, Chapter 9, Bhishma Dev's instructions. There's the series of things that happened. The Pandavas come, Bhishma Dev is partying, Yudhisthira is feeling full of grief about what happened, that so many persons killed, etc. Bhishma Dev pacifies him in various nice ways. And it was a little bit uphill, but Bhishma Dev, managed to pacify Yudhisthira. So Yudhisthira is now ready, following Bhishma Dev's elevating words. He's ready to be the king. Then he asks, how do I do my duties? And one of the duties of a king is to see that the citizens develop character. Prabhupada writes this in several times in light of the Bhagavad, that the principal responsibility of good government is to develop character of the citizens. Extract taxes is their right, and then how are the taxes to be deployed for building character in the citizens? Because a good leader with good citizens makes everything flourish. This is their first duty. Similarly, in Bhishma Dev's discussion in Canto 1, Chapter 9, he describes the system of education for building character. So it's a Brahmana's duty, but the Brahmana's duty is to be overseen or ensured that they're doing their duty. Even the Brahmana is up here and the Kshatriya is down here, but are there to see that they're doing their duty, which is educating. And it starts with youth. And the way that this, simplifying what's described more elaborately, that the boys go to the home of the guru, That means there's the guru and his wife, and there's the home. And they live with the guru. So guru is like their second father. And he, the essential teaching, of course, is the essence, the para dharma. But before there's swa dharma is para dharma, and included in that para dharma is the behavior, the character, the conduct. You know, the standard. The brahmachari is engaged in menial service. That's the mode of brahmachari training: austerity, simplicity, and menial service to the guru. Like Krishna and Sudama Brahman did. Get wood for the yajna. Menial service. Collect alms for the guru. And then the alms go to the guru gives to his wife, the wife does the cooking, and then offers to the Lord, and then invites the boys that gather the alms to accept their meal. But it's the property of guru. Anyway, so after those basic training in character comes the guru's seeing what's the nature of this young boy. And depending upon the nature of the young boy, then there's his Varna type of education. A very qualified teacher, very qualified Brahmana would know what their nature is and would give them the skills to follow that nature. And if there was some tendency that they weren't so skilled in, they would turn them over to another once the foundational character was established. There's examples of that in Scripture. Then their ashram. So the way that it's described, I like the way it's described. The boys were taught, the language is really nice, counteraction by action and something. If the young boy shows the character of one who's renounced, then he's encouraged to be renounced. And if the young boy is shown to be attached, then there's counteraction by proper action according to their nature. So they're taught how to live, even as young, not little boys, but young, how to prepare themselves for household life. So the starting point is service to the personality of Godhead Vasudeva through the medium. So like it's described in Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, the items of knowledge are 19, and those items of 19, they're all qualities, it's good character. And the foundation of the good character is devotion to the personality of Godhead. And that's received through worship of the Guru. So Acharya Upasana makes it possible to achieve Mai Chananya Yogena Bhakti Rabhyabhicharini. So anyway, that's just an elaboration on this first point. The primary duty of the householder, ideal. It happens from the beginning of the earliest stages of their training in the care of a proper teacher. First duty, to be fully dependent on Vasudeva and try to satisfy him in all respects by executing one's prescribed devotional service. Prescribed devotional service, swadharma. So back to Canto 1, Chapter 9. The Guru would understand this boy's nature is this, that one's nature is that, etc. And they would give them training according to their nature. Then they would have prescribed duties. Shastrically derived, but prescribed by the Guru. So this is yours. And here's how you do. And having that obedience to Guru, then they could do their swadharma in accordance with the codes of Scripture for the purpose of satisfying the Supreme Lord. And on this question of how do I balance between my material and spiritual duties doesn't come up. Because Swadharma becomes transcendental. If the first position is in place, the second position is in place. If the first position isn't in place, then it becomes this balancing thing, which is not a transcendental terminology. Everything's for Krishna. The devotional service, this devotional service, will depend on the instructions of authorities and the association of devotees who are actually engaged in devotional service. This is a chapter summary of, the question is, what's the duties of a householder? How can, essentially, wow, Prahlad was way up there. How does one get way up there? So that's this chapter. The beginning of devotional service is Shravanam, or hearing. One must hear from the mouths, plural, of realized souls. In this way, the Grahasta's attraction to his wife and children will gradually be reduced. So, this is being described not like in the beginning, the preamble, before even the marriage happens, supposing that hasn't happened. Supposing it has happened, the principle doesn't change. It's so that, the tendency to be strongly attached. Do you need a chair? Are you okay on the floor?
No, I'm good, thank you.
You good?
Thank you very much.
We're happy to get you a chair.
I'm good, thank you very much.
Okay. So we're going to hear several. This is the end. What I just read is the end of the first paragraph. One of the principles of spiritual life, regardless of varna or ashram, is detachment. Now, how you get to the question, how to be detached when there's a tendency to be attached to objects of the senses. In household life, there's as a house, and there's wife and relatives and friends and paraphernalia and stuff. So how to be a householder as opposed to a brahmachari, vanaprastha, or sannyas, where you don't have so much stuff. But for a household, you've got stuff. And the attachments to stuff. Specifically here, it's attachment to wife. But it's not just wife, it's mine. I and mine. So it requires spiritual conception. So it's how to get to spiritual conception by hearing and rendering things. This is like karma yoga, rendering the fruits of your work to the Supreme. And then under guidance, through the process of hearing, awaken the dormant sense of who we really are, and diminish the tendency to think otherwise, because there is a tendency to think otherwise. There's a very nice, we had a really nice discussion. Probably a person you most of here in Houston you don't know. One person you probably know is Radhika Raman. He's kind of a celebrity personality, Sanskrit. He has a younger brother. His younger brother is less known, Gopal Hari. But he's also he's a wonderful devotee. And during one of the morning classes at Naperville, because that's where he lives, we had this discussion about Swadharma and Paradharma. And in short, one of the outcomes is a nice understanding. Swadharma means So we're going up here. From the transcendent Supreme Lord, there's an indication of how a person of this propensity or that propensity or other propensity should regulate and elevate. So there's an acknowledgement for a grahasta, just speaking now ashram besides of varna, that there's some affinity for something, for male-female association or something or something or something. Some affinity. Now, swadharma, ashram-wise, is to provide for that in such a way that it's regulated and with the mood of detachment from even that which is regulated, so that one can go beyond even the affinity when one's not there yet, but to go beyond the affinity. And if you go beyond the affinity, what's on the other side of that? This is meant for Krishna service. The house is meant for Krishna service. The refrigerator is meant for Krishna service. What's in the refrigerator is meant for Krishna service, and so forth and so on. The wardrobe is meant for Krishna service. Whatever it is that's household paraphernalia is meant for Krishna service. So it's to regulate that tendency to have and think it's mine, but to regulate it in such a way, swadharma, in such a way, this is ashram specific now, not varna specific, that one gradually becomes relieved of that affinity by these two things. Under the authority of Scripture, which means under the authority of Narayana, under the authority of the Supreme Lord who gives Dharma, under his authority, and with the regulation that's designed to address the attraction, the affinity for enjoyment, but at the same time gradually diminish it. That's what's being said here. And one of the key points that's being made, this is just a chapter summary, is hearing. Hearing from proper sources, hearing from sadhus, hearing from persons who are living a life of devotion with attachment to Krishna, so that one can become diminished in one's tendency for attachment. Now, mentioned specifically here is wife, but it's the whole thing. It's mine, whatever is in the category of mine. My car, my computer, my bank balance, my stuff. Mine. Paragraph. As for the maintenance of his family, a grahasta, while earning what he requires for his living, must be very conscientious and must not undergo extraordinary endeavor simply to accumulate money and unnecessarily increase in material comforts. Does that sound familiar? Atyahara, right? Atyahara? Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction. There's 6 things that destroy bhakti, and the first on the list is that one. So it's overeating, over collecting, over accumulating. Like, how many pairs of shoes do you need, for example? Or something. So, what you need, fine. As a householder, fine. And be cautious to over-accumulate wealth or over-accumulate that which wealth can buy and become attached, because that's what happens. There was a devotee, I won't mention his name, but he knew that he had a tendency to accumulate stuff. he ended up becoming a householder, but at a time when he wasn't a householder, he had a tendency to accumulate stuff. So he had a ritual. Once a year, he spread all this stuff out in his room. And then he selected the things that he felt he really needed, and he gave the rest away. That's before he became a householder. I don't know what happened afterwards, but it was a cultivation of just a principle, because knowing I have this tendency to accumulate. So one must not undergo extraordinary endeavor. So what's another nice verse? Extraordinary endeavor. Particularly for a householder. Anasaktasya Vishayan. You know the verse? Yatarham upayunjitaha. You know the verse. Say it loud enough so everyone can hear. Did he get it right?
Yes.
Yeah. See? You got it right. Without anasaktasya, without attachment. Without attachment to what? Vishayan. Vishaya means sense gratification. So what Prabhupada is, what Rupa Goswami is doing, is giving the teachings of Lord Chaitanya on the strength of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and this is one section where, amongst many sections, where the principles that he writes are summarized. The principle that he writes are summarized of what's in the scripture, which is according to Lord Chaitanya's teachings. So, anasaktasya vichayan, without attachment to sense enjoyment. Then comes a tricky word. Yatarham. What's yatarham means? The way that Prabhupada has translated it is according to suitability. That's wild. So it means it's flexible. So what's suitable for one may not be suitable for another, is not suitable for another, not suitable for another. So it's customized. But the principle of the customization is without attachment to sense gratification. Without attachment to sense gratification means renunciation. We were discussing this a couple of times now. With Sudama Brahman. Do you know that story? Sudama? Sudama Brahmana, Sudama when he was a little boy, and Krishna was a little boy, Krishna and Balaram were young, 11, 12-ish, they went to school. They went to the same school. And the school was a different place than where they lived. Krishna lived in Mathura. Sudama lived near Dwarka, near the sea on the west coast of India. And the other place was in Maharashtra. So some distance away. They went to school. So they lived in the ashram of the Guru. And when they both graduated, Krishna and Sudama, they went this way, they went that way. And then many years later, Sudama came to visit Krishna. He came to visit Krishna because his wife, who had a kind of renunciation like him, like they just didn't like stuff. They didn't want to ask God for stuff either. He didn't work. He didn't go and beg alms. Just whatever would come to his house, that's what they accepted. He was lean and thin, and so was his wife. Although he was pure. So Prabhupada comments that there are two kinds of renunciation. One, like Prahlad Maharaj, or like Yudhishthira Maharaj, or like Ambarish Maharaj, they're indifferent. If they have, they're not attached. If they don't have, they're not attached. They're indifferent. And such a person, such a renowned person, can receive lots and lots and lots and remain indifferent, because tendency is you get something and you become the enjoyer of that something. You get more, you become the enjoyer more. Than one starts to become bewildered and proud and fallen. But there are persons who have a kind of renunciation that if it's on this side or that side, they're fine. And Prabhupada wanted to teach us in that principle. I'll tell us Prabhupada's story about that. But there's another kind of renunciation, and that other kind of renunciation is likened to Jad Bharat and Sudama Brahman. He just didn't like. If somebody gave him something, he would say no, because I just don't like. Or he'd just immediately give it away because he didn't like. He had a dislike. He was not uncomfortable. He was not proud that I just see how renounced I am. He just didn't like. And it says in relation to his pastime, my commentary, Krishna was contemplating. He doesn't like, so I won't. That's why he doesn't have. He doesn't like, and the Supreme Lord will not force him. And so he didn't have. So for householders, it's not the one is more advanced if you have less, or less advanced if you have more. What the principle is that you're not attached, and you accept that which is necessary, and you leave aside that which is not necessary. I mean, there's a long discussion about the renunciation of householders, but it's a principle, and it works when there's attachment to Vasudeva, or is it Krishna? And it doesn't work if it's cosmetic. Like changing your clothes. Put on this set of clothes, then put on that set of clothes. The grahastha must be very conscientious and, to do your duty, your swadharma nicely, and must not undergo extraordinary endeavor simply to accumulate money and unnecessarily increase material comforts. Although a grahastha should, this is interesting, externally be very active in earning his livelihood, it should internally be situated in as a fully self-realized person without attachment for material gains. Here's the Prabhupada story. It's nice. My experience, I didn't have as much as some devotees had association with Prabhupada, but every experience was instructive. So one morning was a morning walk, Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan, and at right on time, Prabhupada would leave his room, go along the side of the temple, go out the front gate, turn right, and go for a walk. And there, some devotees would go with him. So that particular morning, I was tagging along, and what you see when you go out the front gate today, and what we saw when Prabhupada was there, looked very different. Now it's bedlam out there, but when it was just agricultural fields. So anyway, long walk, agricultural fields left and right. Some distance down the way, there was a little forested area. So Prabhupada looked, and off he went down the path through the forested area. And his mood, the mood that he was expressing, was, life in Vrindavan is so nice. Everything is so simple. Nature supplies everything that one needs. One simply has to depend upon nature. He walked over to a tree There's some pods hanging from the tree. He says, "Is this edible?" Pulled on it, and what nature supplies, roots and fruits and berries, and kept walking. We got to the edge of a drop off. Looked over at the see over there. He pointed with his cane. There's a householder by their the little cottage. They have a cow. A sadhu can go there in the morning with his cup and ask at milking time for a cup of milk and some basic edibles, and his economic needs for the day are finished. The rest of the day is for hearing and chanting about Krishna. Life in Vrindavan. So he was massaging that mood. And then we were starting to walk back, and he stopped suddenly and said, "Ask Brahmananda, did you receive the $50,000? Did you put it in the right account from my book trust? Did you check the, what do you call it, the galley proofs, and, make sure that the color separations came out nicely?" And then he switched, life of simplicity. My understanding was he was wanting to show us this indifference. Be happy when it's simplicity, and be happy when it's in abundance, and not be enamored by it. Not be enamored by it. Know how to use it in Krishna's service, but not be enamored by it, because that's going to come up. You'll see. He should be situated as a self-realized person without attachment for material gains. Listen to this. His dealings with family members or friends should be performed simply to fulfill their purpose, one should not be extravagantly engaged in this way. Now, a word that Prabhupada liked and used it many times was the extravagant. It's when somebody has abundance and they indulge in the abundance. And the contrasting word was the introspective. So he was encouraging, be introspective. Like, what's the purpose of life and what's the best way to achieve it? And while you're conscious and remaining conscious of the purpose of life, you engage in things with family and friends and society, but it's not an indulging attachment, because with attachment comes, comes misery. Guaranteed. Just the nature of this place. Even if you're not attached, it comes. What to speak if you're attached? Just amplifies. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. It's not real happiness. And misery, as amplified, is guaranteed. So you dutifully, but not extravagantly. Being introspective or inwardly conscious of who you are, what your mission in life is. And your responsibility to others. There's a spiritual responsibility, which means then you're in a better position to help them in all the other ways that one could be, helpful to others, like family members and friends, and etc. Listen to this. Instructions from family members and society should be accepted superficially. But, in essence, the Grihastha should be engaged in occupational duty advised by the spiritual master and Shastra. Specifically, a Grihastha should engage in agricultural activities to earn money. He liked the Vaishya occupation because it was simple. If by chance or by the grace of the Lord more money comes, it should be properly engaged for the Krishna consciousness movement, or for service to Krishna. One should not be eager to earn more money simply for sense pleasure. A Grihastha should always remember that one who is endeavoring to accumulate more money than necessary is to be considered a thief and is punishable by the laws of nature. Isavasyam. Anyone not familiar with that? Isavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. So it's Ishopanishad verse 1, number 1, indicating the way to live one's life is when one accepts what is one's quota because it's given by God and not accepting other things. Prabhupada calls it the Isavasya spirit, God-centered spirit. You accept things and engage them according to needs and necessities, but not more than that, because that more than that is meant for someone else. It goes on. A grihastha should be very much affectionate toward lower animals, birds and bees, treating them exactly like his own children. A grihastha should not indulge in killing animals or birds for sense gratification. He should provide the necessities of life even to the dogs and the lowest creatures, and should not exploit others for sense gratification. Factually, according to the instructions of Srimad Bhagavatam, every grihastha is a great communist, spiritual communist, who provides the means of living for everyone. So this goes into the charity aspect. But whatever a grihastha may possess, he should equally distribute to all living entities without discrimination. The best process is to distribute prasad. I remember years ago, you may remember years ago, Dinanath asked me, could you give a week-long seminar on the duties of a grihastha? Remember that? I remember that. So I did what he asked me to do. I just, every evening was charity, 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 and charity. And you read in the scriptures, and it's always charity and charity and charity and charity. There's so many ways of one can say, because that's the ashram, specific ashram that maintains the other three. It maintains them, and it maintains the other three. And then what to speak of the other three? The animals and birds and this and that. Here's a Bhaktisiddhanta story. I heard this from Borijan. For some period of time, Bhaktisiddhanta conducted Brajmandal Parikram. And the Brajmandal Parikram was done in such a way, kind of like our, group of devotees that go for 30 days, they leave, and they come back 30 days later. They go around the whole of Brajmandala. So he was conducting such a Brajmandala, and for some number of days, he was basing himself at Radhakund, and in the afternoon, evening, during Kartik, the devotees would go to different places led by different sadhus and so forth. So on one of those occasions, they were circumambulating around Radhakund. And Radhakund commonly has some widows and sadhus that just sit there with a little plate or cloth or something, and they just chant, and whatever people give, that's what they receive.